We want to see three things from the new Trump administration. One is the reduction of the deficit into a surplus. The second is the reduction of the deep state. And the third is the abolishment of censorship. These are the three things that the Trump administration should focus on. And if they focus on those three things, then I think we will have a Goldilocks in the markets. Now, the markets have been rallying after Trump's win. Tesla has been doing extremely well for various reasons. We're going to discuss some of them. But the focus of this episode is really on those three fundamental issues that we believe are crucial for a healing of the country. And the reason we want to discuss this in this way is because there's so many things you can do, and so many policies, and so many ideas, and so much hatred, and so much reconciliation, and so on and so forth. I think in this particular case, it is much, much better to focus on the big issues and then let them trickle down to behavior. In other words, we're doing something a little bit un-Austrian here, which is we don't start with the human action. Actually, we do start with the big policy and then trickle it down to human action. For example, if we can reduce the deficit into a surplus, then the effectiveness of the Fed will disappear. And therefore, we will have kind of as an emergent factor, more sound money. And with more sound money, we will then have all the good human action that Austrian economics would predict. So this is just one example. So again, three things that we expect the Trump administration to do that we think will be extremely Goldilocks for the markets. One is reduce the deficit into a surplus. Second, reduce the deep state. And third, abolish censorship. This is a Not Even Wrong podcast. It's November 10th, 2024. This is Krimdelko. For the year, we're up 57.9%. The market's up 25%. We're outperforming by 32.9%. We had a massive outperformance last week through the election gain. Tesla has done extremely well. Nvidia has done also well. The markets have done well. So everything has been going our way. And I think this is a good segue into what really matters here, which is, okay, look, we had this euphoria. We're euphoric. I told somebody the other day, this feels a bit like when JFK was elected. So there's definitely a hope or euphoria. And we want to put some tangible ideas around that hope. In other words, let's not just be excited about Trump winning and you know, the woke virus hopefully being eradicated and the money wasting and the hypocrisy of the Biden administration being eradicated for once and for all. These are all things that, first of all, are debatable, right? There's 60 plus million Americans who disagree with that. But I think the three things that we suggest here are very difficult to reject, even at least by common sense people. So in other words, they're bipartisan. And let's start. Number one, reduce the deficit. I think there's absolutely no justification of government deficit. And there's a couple of reasons why that is the case. Number one, it's stealing money from people, particularly future generations, because these government deficits are financed with debt, okay? If the government deficits were financed with taxes, and if every dollar that is being overspent by the government is being directly taxed from your paycheck, people would have a clear, transparent view over what's happening with their money, and then they would vote accordingly. In other words, if you went to any kind of liberal, fanatic, pro-illegal immigration person in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Austin, Texas, and all these other blue cities, and you told them, this month we're going to take $1,000 from your paycheck. We need to pay for a bus of immigrants who's coming from Haiti. I'm not sure they would support this kind of immigration. So that's the point, right? So deficits are unethical, they're immoral, they're inflationary, and they really hurt the people that are the weakest, the most vulnerable, the most. So if we want to use some sort of John Rawlsian argument, which is you want to have a society where actions improve the most vulnerable without hurting anybody else. I mean, that's the goal, at least for the beginning, until you max that out. And then you can still talk about redistributive policies and stuff, but they have to be transparent and they have to be explicitly agreed on. So why do we have a problem with deficit? It's not, this is, by the way, this is not about, oh, we don't like redistributive policies or anything like that. This has nothing to do with that. We're all for policies, redistribution, helping the poor, all of those kinds of things. They're on the books. I mean, we're not against those things. Just let's be transparent about it, and let's make it clear that we understand who's paying for what. And at this point, we're way out of left field here. We have no idea where the money is going. We have enormous amounts of corruption in the deep state because there is a soft budget constraint on the government. In other words, they can spend as much as they want. Congress has no incentive to stop spending. The White House has no incentive to stop spending. Nobody has any kind of incentive here to stop anything. And I think that's why Trump was elected so overwhelmingly. And that's what we expect from the Trump administration. That's, of course, what Vivek and hopefully Elon Musk will be mostly instrumental in, reducing the deficit into a surplus. The last time this happened is during the Reagan administration, and then it actually continued into the Clinton administration. So this can be bipartisan. And the 80s and 90s were some of the best economic times, most prosperous times for the United States of America. So we can get back into a time like that because we have the right leadership in place, and that leadership now has a mandate to execute. The second thing we expect Trump to do is to reduce the deep state. This is related to the first one, but it's a little bit, it's a lot more subtle, because the deep state isn't just wasting money, it's also putting regulatory barriers into business and making everything difficult and hindering innovation and progress. Now, the deep state has several definitions. The way we define the deep state is what I call the Eisenhower way, which is the industrial complex, blank industrial complex. So in other words, you can call it the military industrial complex, the academic industrial complex, the public health industrial complex, the environmental industrial complex, any of those things, any of those issues, which are all real issues, right? Education is an issue, environment is an issue, but the industrial complex has appropriated those issues for their own benefit without checks and balances, and is growing literally like a cancer into our society and making progress difficult, making actions difficult. Musk has talked about how they're putting barriers into SpaceX, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. You want to build a house in California, it takes forever with paperwork and things like that. Those are the kinds of things. Now, we're not against regulation. Again, actually, what the deep state does is it is putting the reputation and the effectiveness of regulation on the line. Because when you have that kind of regulation, then even the good regulation gets buried into the bad one. So you cut everything to the bone, and then you rebuild the regulatory framework such that it serves the purpose of the particular agency and at a big picture serves the purpose for the country. So, for example, the education department needs to have a mission. For example, the mission of the education department on the federal level is, according to Vivek Ramaswamy, that we should reduce racist discrimination in the South in public schools. So that's the sort of main purpose of the education department on the federal level. So let's look at it. Let's see what can be done to fulfill that mission. And if maybe, which is my gut feeling, that a lot of the public schools in the South actually have been cured of systemic racism, then we abolish the agency or the department. We can come up with new ideas to do things that need to be done. For example, how to prepare our kids for the future in AI, how to deal with advancements in, particularly things like ChatGPT in education. Maybe there is a case for the federal level to think about these things. Take the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank was established in 1913 in order to save banks from collapsing. So it was kind of like an insurance policy for Wall Street. And of course, it has morphed into something much, much bigger. It has hydras everywhere. It's like a hydra. Lots of arms, lots of influence on the economy, lots of influence on actions. So we need to rein in. The best, again, would be to abolish the Fed and then rebuild an institution that can have value. For example, like Paul Volcker said, one of the values of the Fed is it educates economists on financial matters. So we could have an institution that thinks about financial matters and policies and implements them. Now, of course, abolishing the Fed from within 2 days would destroy the financial markets because of all the debt that we have. So we have to be very careful. So my suggestion there is to start with the first one, which is get to a surplus. And with a surplus, we could, or at least reduce the deficit. But we need a surplus now for a while just to reduce some of the debt, take bonds out of the market, and therefore also reduce the importance of the Fed, because the Fed is, in fact, now monetizing government debt. So if we don't have government debt, then the Fed also cannot misappropriate its powers and monetize government debt. So these things are intertwined. But again, reduce the deep state. This particular episode is not meant to give recommendations in how to do things. This is just sort of a summary of what to do. We're going to talk about the how probably in subsequent episodes. And the third thing is abolish censorship for once and for all. Censorship has no business in an America that was built on the Constitution of the United States, that was underwritten in the 1776 Declaration of Independence, and then later on in the Revolutionary Wars and all of that. This has no business being here. And I think the U.S. needs to be very clear, the Trump administration and the U.S., all the institutions in the United States, the states, the municipalities, and by the way, also our allies, need to understand for once and for all that there is no tolerance for censorship. Censorship is like racism or sexism or sexual harassment or any of those stuff. There is zero tolerance for censorship. And I don't think I need to list the reasons why there should be zero tolerance for censorship. I think we've gone through that as a society, at least since the Enlightenment, and we can even go further back to the Roman Empire and the Greeks. I think we've discussed this ad nauseum, why it's not good to have censorship, why it's not good to tell people what to think and punish people for not thinking the way that some sort of elite thinks they should be thinking, and all those other things that lead to censorship. The problem with censorship for people who still doubt it is, well, who gives you the assurance that tomorrow your voice won't be censored? Maybe today you're on the right side of things, but tomorrow you might be on the wrong side. And for all the liberals who are pro-censorship today, just remember the Bush years, the Bush 2 years during the Iraq War, when we had censorship on the other side of things, and the liberals were going crazy about censorship. So censorship is a bad thing. It needs to be reduced, abolished. I'm not here. This is just as a side note. We're not in this for punishment or for retaliation. Because that's not ours to talk about, and that in my opinion shouldn't be also executed. But we just need we need to abolish censorship. And I think one place to start, and this is another tangent I just want to put in here. There is this conversation now about the within the, let's say, the circles of people who are on the side of Trump and his winning party. I mean, his winning sort of circle of people. We're kind of debating whether Bill Gates should be let in, because he offered his hand. He said, I would like to be willing to work with the Trump administration. Now, a lot of people are appalled to that, because Gates, at least since the beginning of COVID and later on also during the election, has been incredibly anti-Trump, pro-censorship, and all kinds of bad things. But my point is, look, he's too rich to ditch. So why don't we use him to go after Google? And not go after Google in a lawfare kind of way. We shouldn't do the same thing like the liberals did. We should be above board here. We can go after Google in many more intelligent ways. For example, we can, and the best way to go after these things is more talk, more transparency, more and more transparency. We have the X platform for that. We have other platforms, but X is definitely the platform to unveil all these bad things that have been going on within Google particularly. Google is very powerful. Google has deliberately censored lots of things, whether it's in YouTube, whether it's with Gemini, whether it's in the search engine. This type of things, they just need to be put to the surface. I'm not talking about punishment here. I think once people see what is really going on under the hood, just for example, how the Gemini people were deliberately trying to rewrite history. I mean, that's just outrageous. And, I just watched the movie Napoleon yesterday, And for anybody who knows a little bit of the history of the French Revolution, that's what happens when you rewrite history. You end up in the guillotine. Either you are the guillotineur or the guillotinee, and both things are terrible. So to summarize, the three things we want the Trump to focus on from our side here is number one, reduce the deficit. Number two, reduce the deep state, get rid of it. And number three, abolish censorship. Thank you.